Hey guys, and welcome to my first tutorial for UE4 ArcViz. Today I'll be explaining you how to use UE4 for ArcViz, know about the pros and cons about the engine, and also how to achieve a realistic results with lighting and shaders inside UE4. So first of all, I'm going to go to 3D Max. Sorry, I can't have both UE4 and 3D Max running at the same time, otherwise my laptop goes kind of crazy. So I'll start with 3D Max, and this can be followed with any other external 3D programs. The workflow is pretty easy for ArcViz. So yeah, I'm going to show you quickly how I exported all of these assets into UE4, and then I'll fire up UE4 and start talking about how to import the assets, how to learn the light mapping inside the UE4, and a bunch of several tips that could be useful for the ArcViz. Okay, so I'm inside 3D Max, and so this is my project inside the program. So as you can see, I do have a floor plan that is just under the actual mesh, so I can isolate that. So this is my floor plan that I isolated, and just to show you that building on top of the floor plans is extremely important and very useful. If you can find floor plans, it usually gives good sense of dimension, which is very useful. So I'll end this isolation and show you the whole mesh that I have. Okay, so yeah, quick overview here. I won't spend too much time on 3D Max. I know that UE4 is the most important for you guys, but I just want to show you something very important for 3D Max, which is like the most important thing in UE4 is the light maps. So UE4 uses the second UV channel to use with the light map. So the way you do that is that you apply a unwrap modifier. So I have in the quick shortcuts here, but it's if you go in the modify tab and go to unwrap UVW, you have the unwrap here. And what you need to do is switch to channel number 2, abandon, open the UV editor, Control A, mapping, flatten mapping, and I usually go with 0.02. Okay, and that is your light map information that is going to be used for UE4. So a quick way of doing that instead of manually doing it is that I found a pretty useful plugin called Steamroller, and if you just type Steamroller inside Google, you'll find it pretty easy. So Steamroller, nope, maybe 3ds Max. There we go, Steamroller, scriptspot.com. It's free, great way to use it because basically instead of doing it manually, I have the shortcut already installed, Steamroller, UV channel 2, unwrap, and you do it for everything. It's so much faster. There, and now you have a flattened map for the second UV channel. So I'll see you back on UE4. Hey guys, and here we are back inside UE4. So this is my latest project, as some of you may have seen inside ArtStation or Instagram. And many of you have asked on how I managed to achieve realistic results, and I know a lot of people asked about the lighting and the settings, so I'll go through that and explain how to get realistic results and keeping good optimization of your game, because you are inside a game engine, and that you always have to bear in mind that you're running all of this in real time. So yeah, this is my scene. As you can see, that all the props that you've seen inside 3D Max have been imported here. So this is the lounge and this is the kitchen. And I can also play inside it. I've added this feature, but it's very easy. You can just import the first person template, remove the gun, and because you don't want a gun inside the ArcViz world, that will look a bit strange. And yeah, just get the controls, and there you go. So if you want me to explain more in details on how to do that, I can do another tutorial about it. This is just basically to show the workflow inside UE4. Okay, back in the editor. Okay, so I'm going to show you quickly on how I deal with the exported mesh of 3D Max inside UE4. So I always tend to create folders specifically for the mesh I import. So here, oh no, that's not the right one. Let me find it. Mesh assets. There we go. So all of these are my assets, straight from 3D Max, including the folders too. So it's pretty easy. Just export as FBX, and then you import them inside, and you get the exact same position that you had in 3D Max here. So yeah, later it's just a matter of importing assets. I'm not going to go over these because that is I assume that you know all of this, but I always try to keep it organized and name my meshes SM underscore for static mesh, and that way I just find it easier for me to find some stuff. So you can see that there's a separation here, and that if I go in this room, you can see that this room here is this room here, but it's not on the same mesh. So a very important aspect of a very important aspect of UE4 is always try to separate the walls, but don't separate them too much, and that's kind of a tricky part. So let me explain you why. So here I have this one single mesh as a wall and also the kitchen. So the reason I do that is to avoid lights bleeding through the corners of the wall or from the bottom here. And let me show you the example. There. So see this light bleeding? That is a common problem for UE4 ArcViz people. I think it happens like systematically every single time. And that is due to the walls being separated. And once you do that, UE4 is kind of lost. It's like, okay, where does the light go? How do I deal with this? And that is why sometimes I cheat with doing a whole single mesh. So you can probably get away with this size, which isn't too big. But if you were to do a whole villa or something, and that every wall was the same mesh, that would be very bad. You would need a huge light map resolution to counter all the light bleeding, and that's not what you want to do. I always try to separate the walls and just be very smart about it. I know that this room I was not intended to continue here, so I separated the wall because I knew I wasn't going to use it. But if you are going to use it, the way you would do it is just be smart about it. And actually, this is pretty good. The corridor, which would be here, you would want that as a separate mesh. And if there is light bleeding, you basically compensate that with increasing the light map resolution. So if you go click here on the mesh and go down, override light map, and sometimes that can fix the problem, but sometimes it doesn't. So you just need to play around and see if the seams are not intersecting correctly. That can cause some issues. You always need two open faces that are attached together, otherwise I think this one, as you can see, let me go into lighting mode. So actually this one is okay, but the problem is that this portion here is let me get a slightly better. Damn, I can't get. Oh, okay, this is good. This wall is plain and this has an open face, and these two intersecting will have some issues for sure. So always have two walls that have open faces and have attached vertex. That always avoids light bleeding. Sometimes for the floor here, you can always have this issue. So the way to counter that is the light map, increase the light map, or you can also check that if there is some light going through. So as you can see here, this mesh has a two-sided material on it. So this basically means that this has material here, it's receiving light information from here, but also from the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to show you the quick way I'm working on the materials and shaders here. So once you have the materials set up inside a UE4, I always tend to use material parameters. So if I go onto this basic white glossy material, so this is the master material here. So you can see this has an albedo, which is set to parameter. You have the UV scale here, which is set to parameter 2. You have the roughness too. Oh, and the specular too. So this is a basic constant 1. If I wanted to change the specular and see the result in real time, basically I can convert this into parameter, name it specular. Okay. So you can obviously change all of these values inside the editor here, but every time you press apply, it's going to compile the shaders, and that's going to take a lot of time. So the way you do this is put a bunch of constants here, you multiply them with some nodes, and these constant 1 values are going to be parameters. So once you do that, save that. You want to right click and create material instance. So I already have, actually I can do one here, yeah. I already have a bunch of you and all of these are reading from the master material. So if I were to apply this material on this shelf, you can change, so if you double click on it, you can change all of these parameters that we later previously parametered. So I can change the roughness of it here. So you can see there's more roughness, you can see some kind of dust. I can change the scale of it. If I want something more specular, I can change also. So that is the parameter that we changed earlier on. And I can also change the color. And all of this is done in real time, instead of going inside the material editor and applying every time. This is a great way to have instant feedback. And all of my materials, every single one of them is a material instance, because it just allows me to have more control over it. So this floor here is also parametered, and I have a bunch of different textures for it. So actually this is using a pack from the marketplace called 4K wood flooring. Yeah, 4K materials wood flooring. Very, very good pack. I added a cavity map, which gives a bit more detail. If I go inside here, yeah, it usually pops out the blacks. So it's a little feature, but I know it's pretty useful. So I've got some bit of roughness, bit of dust going. Actually, this is a roughness map, but if you slightly adjust it, it gives kind of this dust feel to it. And yeah, so this is the floor. I won't go over too much on this because it's this is a pack that you can buy. What else can I show you? Oh, okay, so about the lighting, many of you asked how to achieve a realistic light inside UE4. So the way I always do it is when I build the walls and I get the floor and the roof, I maybe use put a couple of assets inside the room. I always use this mode, lighting only, and this always gives you a nice kind of overview of what your lighting is going to look like. So that is always baked lighting. So put your stuff in, then use the build. I always go with build lighting quality medium for having a quick overview. And here you can see the really nice effect of lighting, which has kind of this blue tint coming from the sky, and then here the light is bouncing back onto the wall. That gives this warm feeling, which is very nice actually. I really like this lighting, and all of this is just experimenting with the directional light here. Sorry, it's not the sky. Directional lights here, just by moving the values a bit, getting the skylight into here to capture the sky information, or HDRI, it depends. Whatever suits you best. It's all about experimenting. And then I'll delete that one. Then the Skylight Portals, which are used for basically telling light mass okay, I need you to emit all the photons here. So they concentrate all the photons and emit it inside the room. So always keep these light mass pools on each opening. And the way you find those are if you type light mass or even light, you can find them here. Just drag them and basically resize them to the opening that you have. Actually, I'm going to show you some little tweak that I found on UE4 forums. It's called the Skylights multi-bounce. So the way that works is if I go into the forums, Skylights multi-bounce UE4. So this is a little tool. Well, actually, it's a mod. It's a light mass mod. Done by this guy, Luo Shuang, I believe. So this guy worked on a mod that is using the skylight and emits multiple bounces. And you can see the difference here is pretty amazing. So I've done a few experimentations with this light bounce, multi-bounce skylights. As you can see here, there's comparison between the default and his mod here. So there is a pretty clear difference inside. So I've tested that, and this is just a little mod that you override the Unreal Light Mass.exe, and I had way better results with it. It's just has this ability to bounce multiple times, and I imagine that I had this very nice bounce on this wall here. It does also take a bit more time to calculate, but I would recommend doing it, testing it out. Although, as I'm speaking right now, version 4.18 is coming out pretty soon, and it's going to have this mod. It's not going to be his, but I know he's worked on it with another guy from Epic Games, and they have implemented this in version 4.18. So this is going to come, and I believe there's no need to try it out with the new version because it's going to be implemented in. But for 4.17 and previous versions, if you want to still try it out, feel free to. He has, for 4.15 and 4.16. So once you install the mod, is that it's going to take into consideration the indirect lighting bounce. So I've put it to 10, and when I'm going to build that, it's going to calculate 10 skylight bounces. So it takes a bit of more time, but the results are pretty amazing. So yeah, these are my light mass settings for here. So I have a static lighting level scale of 0.3. You can go even further down, maybe 0.1. I think I went with 0.1 actually, just because I didn't build this on my laptop. So the indirect lighting bounce, if you are using the mod, again, 10 is a pretty good value. Maybe you can go even higher. I think I went with 15 or even 20. That is if you're using the mod. If you're not using the mod and still with the default light mass, you can go up to 100, like pretty high. Indirect lighting quality, I used 5, and lighting smoothness is always slightly lower than the lighting quality. I believe between 1.7 and 1 is good. So here, use ambient occlusion. I used baked AO for all of this, which gives me much nicer results than SSAO. Again, this takes a bit more time because this has to generate AOs for all the mesh, but you get much nicer results. And that's about it for the lighting settings. So yeah, there we go. Let me know in the comments if I need to go over some stuff. I try to keep this kind of short, even though it's very hard. I talk a lot about stuff, but there's so many stuff to talk about on this project. If you want me to go over some details that you did not understand, or some lighting information, again, I'm not an expert on lighting. I'm still learning as from today, but I'm happy to help some of you that have some issues with lighting, or some issues with textures or shading. I'd be very glad to help you out. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and let me know if I need to do more.
Hello, in this tutorial we'll show you how to import Evermotion models to new scene. In Content Browser, after clicking with right mouse button, we will have few additional options. We are interested in Asset Action Migrate. This option not only copies the mesh, but also its materials and textures. Then we get Asset Report with info that content will be migrated to the new project. Next, we need to choose where we want to migrate the models. It always needs to be content folder of another project. Now we just need to open our new project, and the model can be found in Content Browser and drag and drop into 3D viewport. If you need the models in exact same place, you can simply copy and paste them between projects. Of course, they need to have some hierarchy in content folder. If assets aren't shown properly, just close and open again your new project. In this tutorial we will show you how to modify imported model or texture. It's important to know that Migrate moves only EU asset files. Every asset, mesh, material, texture is converted to this format, but if we want to modify it, we need to export it first to a format acceptable for other software. FBX for 3D meshes and TGA for textures. The process is the same as with Migrate. Click with right mouse button onto Asset, choose Asset Action and Export. Note that if you are using other software than 3ds Max, for example Blender, FBX is still preferable because it allows multiple UV channels. Export can also be used to copy models between projects, but because it loses materials, it's not recommended. In this tutorial, we will show you how to use materials. In latest Arc Interiors for Unreal, we used slightly modified approach to materials. We created few base shaders and used material instances. This way we can have real-time interactive preview and unification in shaders. It also saves a lot of time. Almost all materials are instances of base matte, used for surfaces which don't need opacity. The goal was to mimic some of 3ds Max and V-Ray material functionality, like diffuse, roughness, which is inverse of glossiness, specular, which is Viri reflection, with taking into account that Unreal uses PBR material's additional metallic channel. The main difference is that metallic surfaces use diffuse color for tinting reflections. Each material comes with color and texture inputs and UV options, offset texture, 3ds Max real world scale size and UV rotate, but also basic color correction like contrast and color overlay. You can achieve bumpiness with normal maps or black and white bump texture. You can also overlay black and white texture onto normal map as a detail map, for example if you want to have a couch with wrinkles and fabric detail texture. For glass surfaces, we created base translucent material with Fresnel angle-based opacity and refraction. For making fur or short grass, we use displacement shader. Note that if displacement is too large and intersects with other geometry, it can lead to flickering during animation or walkthrough. All our plants are using two-sided foliage and are animation ready, with basic controls like, for example, speed and intensity of wind. For proper animation, trees require vertex paint. Our tree models in ArchInteriors for UE Vol 2 are vertex painted, of course. This tutorial covers UV mapping, use of real-world scale and custom light map UVs. Another new thing that we put in ArchInteriors for UE Vol 2 are multiple UV channels and 3ds Max real-world scale. This way, one 3ds Max unit equals 1 cm of texture. We can easily exchange materials between scenes and models without worrying about wrong scale. Example, wooden floor material looks just as good on a wall as on other objects. The only disadvantage of this technique is that Unreal Material Preview Ball doesn't show textures in the right scale. There is a workaround. You can use Custom Object to just check your materials in viewport. UV Channel 1 is reserved for light maps in all our models. We unwrapped most of our objects with dedicated plugin Flatiron. To ensure good quality, we also unwrap some objects in Blender, carefully by hand. In this tutorial we will talk about blueprint interaction, doors. In ArchInteriors for UE Volume 2 we added simple interactivity. Doors can be opened or closed with right mouse button click. Of course, the blueprint is highly customizable. It's made of 3 elements. First is box trigger object. It's used for interaction. If player steps into box volume, keyboard is unlocked and mouse icon is shown. The second element is static mesh. It is the place where we choose our door mesh. It's important that it has its pivot placed at hinges. And then there is material billboard 1. Here we add and configure the icon, which will indicate player what kind of interaction is allowed. Each of these elements has its associated nodes in event graph. This part of graph is responsible for collision with a trigger object. If the player walks into box trigger volume, on component begin overlap, keyboard and mouse are unlocked, it's enable input, and our icon becomes visible, set visibility. After leaving the box, volume keyboard is locked again and icon becomes invisible. The part of graph below is responsible for handling the door. Even begin play, this node will be always executed when you will start the game or walkthrough. Here we set rest position for doors. They are closed and player needs to open them to pass to other room. Then, when player walks into box and after clicking right mouse button, we can execute an event. It is based on flip-flop node. First, right-click executes play, opens the door, right-clicking again reverses animation and closes the door. The animation graph is a simple float track, is used to set interpolation between keyframes. It's linear in this case, which means that the speed of animation is constant. Our animation is 1 second long. You can set duration of the animation in the length box above the graph. Timeline uses update output to execute each frame's set relative rotation node by amount specified in lerp rotator. This simply says the door to open, close. The last part is used to move our icon to the other side of door, so when we walk into the room, we can still see it. Values for lerps are relative to actual blueprint position rotation. We could use matinee animation instead of these nodes, but this way it's a bit easier to exchange nodes and build upon a more complicated blueprints. Last thing worth to mention is construction script, which is executed always when we create or move our door blueprint. It just sets the door in open position. Other way we could get black borders after baking light. This tutorial will teach you about blueprint ES-Lights interaction. Another example of interactive blueprint is the use of ES-Lights. They are a bit more complicated than interactive doors because you want one trigger to turn on and off many specific lights and have ability to move each light separately. These interactive lights are split as two blueprints. First one is the trigger and the second are the lights. Light trigger is made almost the same way as doors were. Instead of having geometry inside, it communicates with other blueprints. Example. After pressing left mouse button, we tell the blueprint to find all lights associated with the trigger, get all actors of class. Every blueprint is a custom class. Then, for every one of them, for each loop, we execute IS visibility event. Note that IS visibility is a custom event made in another blueprint. In this case, in corridor _IS_00. Lights associated with the trigger are very simple. When the event begin play is executed, for example by pressing play, the light is hidden and we need to execute ES_visibility event to turn it on or off. This way, when we add another lights, duplicates of specific ES light blueprint, they are automatically taken into account. Note that if duplicated blueprints, trigger and IS light, are not working correctly, you get error while compiling, make sure IS light is saved and compiled, then manually add again 3 last nodes, get all actors of class, for each loop and IS visibility to the trigger. This tutorial will teach you how to get higher rendering quality. Most of default Unreal settings are well suited for games, but if we want to make high-quality ArcViz renders, we need to change a few things. First is light mask quality. Light mask is Unreal way of dealing with global illumination. It's similar to V-Ray light cage or Aradian's map. It first computes bounces of light and then bakes them to light maps. That's why there can't be any UV overlaps or mirroring. Most of light mask quality settings can be found in the World tab. 4 options are the most important. First is static lighting level scale. The smaller scale, the more samples are emitted. Note that too small value can produce lighting artifacts or give visible patterns. Undirect lighting bounces. This setting controls how many times light will bounce. Indirect lighting quality. It is the most important slider. It's locked at 4. If you want to achieve higher quality, you need to click on the number and manually enter 10 value. Note that increasing indirect lighting quality value has the big impact on light mask bake time. Indirect lighting smoothness. Here you can control how much smoothing is added to all shadows. Smaller values give crisp-looking shadows, but also can introduce artifacts. If you still don't get satisfying results, you need to increase light map size of the models. The best way is to override default values. Note that light map resolution value has a big impact on baking time, so it's better to have lower resolution in static mesh settings. Most of our models in Arc Interiors for UE Vol 2 have light map resolution between 128 and 256 to get the quickest preview lighting baking times. If you want to achieve even better quality, just override it in Details panel. If there are too many big light maps in the scene, there can be errors during packaging a project to exe file. Remember that light maps are only textures that are streamed by engine to fixed buffer size. If buffer is full, engine loads mapped, scaled, much lower resolution textures, so if you have too many big maps, buffer will fill much quicker and you will get lower quality maps during streaming. You can also turn off streaming completely, but you will need a powerful machine to play the animation. Another thing is screen space reflections quality. Unreal has two ways of dealing with reflections, using reflection capture spheres and post-process screen space reflection. The latter has much higher quality. Reflection capture spheres are constrained by DirectX 11. They can be maximum 128 pixels in size. To get higher quality anti-aliasing, we can add execute console command node in level blueprint with r.postprocess AA quality 6. If you want more particles and from some reason you can't switch to GPU particles, execute another console command fx.max CPU particles per emitter. Default value is 1000, you may need to increase it. It's a good practice to render final output in at least 2 times bigger resolution than intended. Although you will get much slower playback, the quality boost is worth it. You can find this option in Global Post-Process, MISC Screen Percentage.